Hello everybody, my name is Landon and this will be my overview of the Traxxas Maxx, a so-called 1/10 scale four-wheel drive electric monster truck. I say so-called 1/10 scale because it is much larger than what we normally refer to as 1/10 scale. The overall length and width is 22.5 inches by 16 inches, whereas a Stampede 4x4, for example, is only 20 inches by 13 inches. The chassis is a plastic tub style that features modular construction, meaning the entire front and rear ends can be removed from the chassis itself for ease of maintenance and tuning. The battery tray uses a convenient clipless hinged hold down that is bolted to the chassis on both ends, so it is basically impossible for it to ever fall out. The front features solid plastic non-adjustable turnbuckles, so front toe cannot be adjusted, as well as solid upper control arms, so front camber cannot be adjusted either. And turning the front wheels is Traxxas's 2090 steering servo. It is the same one that is used on the Maxx Slash, which is a short course truck based on this same platform. It produces 285 ounce-inches of torque. The lower suspension arms are plastic as well and only have one other mounting option for the shocks. Upper shock position is not adjustable front or rear. The rear is pretty much the same story in that the rear arms and front arms, both upper and lower, are actually the exact same part numbers, so camber is not adjustable and you only have one other lower shock position option. At all four corners, the truck features aluminum threaded body GT Max shocks that are the same size front and rear. The drive shafts are plastic, the hub carriers are filled with ball bearings, and the hubs are 17 millimeter. Powering the Maxx is a Velineon VXL4S system. The ESC can run on both 3S and 4S, comes with a built-in fan, and has 6.5 millimeter bullet connectors. The motor is the 2400 kV Velineon 540 XL. This power is sent to a tunable all-metal torque biasing center diff that then sends the power to all-metal tunable front and rear diffs via an aluminum drive shaft. The tires are Traxxas's sledgehammer style. The compound is moderately soft, and they do have foam inserts. The inner diameter is 5.6 inches and the outer diameter is 2.8 inches. Lastly, the radio system is the TQI 2.4 GHz system that features Traxxas Link for live telemetry and two buttons for programming all of the features such as expos and endpoints. This system does feature an adjustable stability control system that Traxxas calls TSM, or Traxxas Stability Management, that is adjusted using the multifunction knob on the transmitter. This system also has a self-righting feature that I will demonstrate later. Now, since this is an off-road truck, I wanted to start, off-road. And this surface is gravel. And as you can see, I think the tires do hook up fairly well, especially for RTRs. Again, their compound is not the softest, and the tread pattern is super aggressive. I honestly think it's more for looks than it is for actual real-world driving. But I felt even for the power level, I was able to still drive this truck relatively successfully on a surface like gravel. You can get it, it does have grip when you want it to, but you can also get it to slide if you want to. The sidewalls are actually really soft, and you will see, I will demonstrate this later in one of my on-road driving footages, but the outside sidewall on the outside tire will actually kind of fold up and under the tire around a high-speed turn. And as you can see right here, they do actually give me enough grip to drive up, this pile of gravel. So, I mean, again, they are decent. I say it's pretty average for just, name brand or respectable brand RTR. They're not completely useless where you have to throw them away, but it's not going to be the best. And you can certainly find aftermarket tires that do provide better grip. Now, right here, I'm actually driving on much rougher terrain, and this is to try to show just how the suspension soaks up bumps. I felt it was pretty good. It is not as good as what I am considering this vehicle's biggest competitor, which is a vehicle I tested a few months back, but I was never able to actually get a review of it, which was the Arrma Big Rock. I do think the Arrma Big Rock had better suspension out of the box. It definitely was way more better composed over this exact same terrain than the Maxx was. And it also had better tires too. But we're beyond tires at this point. And it's just, it is good. They are big bore. Well, not, I think it's called GT Max shocks. So they do have a fairly large oil capacity, and the bigger an oil capacity, the bigger the oil capacity is of a shock, kind of the better it can handle, dampening and soaking up bumps. But I thought it was pretty good. Again, it's the biggest thing is just your speed. You can only every shock suspension setup has its speed limit for any given terrain. And I was pretty satisfied with how fast I was able to drive this vehicle over this terrain. You're nowhere near full speed. I was probably a quarter throttle, but I feel like I also have realistic expectations, and I was more than happy with the performance I got over this terrain with this suspension setup. And now, before we move on to the on-road driving footage, I did want to demonstrate the self-righting feature as well as the stability control that Traxxas refers to as TSM, or Traxxas Stability Management. So in this first clip, what you're going to see me do is I'm basically going to pick up the vehicle and then just start, I guess, wagging it back and forth, because basically how the stability system works is it is just a yaw sensor basically in the receiver that will just basically automatically counter steer for you. And you can see those front wheels are happily wagging away. All right, and next is the self-righting feature. So let's see how well it works. I would say that's successful, wouldn't you? Now, you may have noticed how when I did that demonstration, it was actually resting perfectly on its roof. But oftentimes when you flip over your RC car, it does not land on the roof perfectly. It can actually be kind of resting or leaning to one side on one bank of wheels. So next I'm going to show you how it handles basically resting on one side. Now, I don't know if you noticed, so I will replay it again, but you can see in the beginning it actually turned the front wheels and used sort of the gyroscope effect to get itself on its roof, and then it did the self-right feature. So it is a pretty intelligent system, and it does know better, and it does know how to fix that problem. Now, here we are on a paved parking lot, obviously. And as you can see, it definitely does have an abundance of power. This is all of my driving footage in this review is actually being done on a 4S battery. And like most off-road vehicles, it has several limiting factors that hamper its performance on-road. For one, a very high center of gravity as natured by the chassis. It does have a high center of gravity chassis for ground clearance. Two, the suspension is not tuned for on-road performance. And three, off-road tires are usually never good on-road. For one, they have high sidewalls. The very aggressive tread pattern is not good for on-road performance. And then two, the sidewalls can be kind of soft, as I mentioned earlier. Again, the sidewalls on these tires are very soft. As you can see right here, I'm kind of doing a figure 8 pattern. And it might be hard to see in the video, but the outside sidewall on the outside front wheel is folding in under itself. And it creates just a very gummy steering feel. It is not precise, and you can see it's also tripoding some, where it's kind of picking up one wheel. Again, that is because of the softer suspension and the high center of gravity. So, just like most off-road specific vehicles, it does not perform the best on-road. You can still drive it on-road and it's still fun, but just don't expect, razor sharp performance like you would an on-road specific vehicle. Now, Traxxas does advertise you can reach speeds up to 55 miles per hour on the stock gearing with a 4S battery. So we are going to see how true this claim is. So here the vehicle is ready to go. I got my GPS app set up on my phone so I can see what my top speed was. And now we are going to send it off very, very, very far away so I can get a nice long run at full throttle. Coming around, and let's see what we got. Yeah, I don't know if you could tell in the video, but I was tripoding just from the torque, and also the tires balloon up, also known as pizza panning from the centrifugal force. But let's see what we got. No, look at that, 54 miles an hour. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Now, as far as problems I've ran into, I actually did run into a few problems. I had 2 breakages and then 1 just recurring issue. The first thing I will cover is the first breakage, which I actually covered it in a previous video, and that was my steering servo. The side mounting tabs actually broke off, and that caused the whole servo to shift forward, which just threw the whole geometry of the steering out of whack. I don't really blame the truck for that. I basically ran square on onto a curb, and I think the G-forces just broke off those ears. Now, the next breakage I had was actually one of the rear axles. As you can see, I had an axle just snap right at the pin for the hub, which was weird. I didn't really know why this happened. When I felt it, it was really, really, really hot, like a bearing almost seized up or something. And upon further investigating, I did determine it was the wheel bearing that caused this failure. When I do eventually pick up the bearing to look at it, on the bad side, you can see it is crushed. It looks like the wheel bearing was crushed, which to me, I think the only way that can happen is that I just over tightened the wheel nut, which I guess, again, technically would not be the truck's fault, but I've never had a vehicle actually be sensitive to that. And lastly, it looks like I am driving in circles when I am not telling the truck to drive in circles. I am actually trying to drive straight. The problem was the steering was jammed, which was caused by that little white rock right there. That is actually a pretty common issue on off-road vehicles that use bell crank style steering. It's just a good place for rocks to get stuck, and since it is the steering system, that's just when you notice it. RC cars actually trap rocks everywhere. You just notice it because it affects something that you want the vehicle to do. But it can be annoying if it happens often. It didn't happen enough for me for it to be really annoying. It's just kind of a minor nuisance. And I never actually had to take apart anything to actually fix that issue. Most of the time, I could either just continue driving and it kind of just jerk the steering wheel back and forth, and that would eventually knock the rock out. Or if I really had to, if it was really stuck in there, I could just take the body off, turn the vehicle upside down, and just shake it, and then it would fall out. Again, I never had to actually take anything apart to fix the issue, so that's why I'm not really considering it that big of a deal. But anyways, it's still a fun truck. I'm glad I got to test it, and I'm looking forward to the next project. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.